Hear me now when I say this, and I don't say it lightly. Darius Taylor could be the best running back in the Big Ten in 2024.
You are Locked On Golden Gophers.
No matter what we're going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
Your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
However it turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
Gopher fans, what is up? You are listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. We've got a little bit of a spicy take, but it shouldn't be spicy on today's show, and that is that Darius Taylor could finish as the number one running back in the Big Ten in 2024. I'm going to give you the reasons why that is a realistic outcome on today's show. We're also going to talk about Drake Lindsey's future and how bright it is. But before we get to those topics, we're going to dive into who were the 5 biggest winners of the spring session for the Minnesota Gophers, in my opinion. We're going to dive right into that. So be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube so you don't miss any of your daily Gophers content moving forward. Now, tomorrow, we'll keep you posted on maybe some draft rumors we're hearing with some of the Gophers prospects. But then Saturday, we'll be sure to cover anything we hear about players getting drafted and what have you. So be sure to hit subscribe on YouTube, and we will talk about Gophers each and every single day of the rest of this month for sure, but each and every day of the week going forward. Now, let's talk about who won spring. 5 players who made a case to compete for major reps starting in the fall and possibly even putting their name into the conversation for a starting opportunity. Now, the first one is a guy who probably is already a starter, but I think he made a case for more targets, more reps, more snaps, more anything. Get this guy on the field as much as possible, and that is none other than Le'Meke Brockington, wide receiver for the Golden Gophers. Now, he's sure-handed, he's dependable, and he's shown that each and every practice ability that we've been able to pop into for the Gophers spring sessions. And he was the only wide receiver who looked consistent throughout every spring opportunity that we got to see. Now, the growth that we saw from Daniel Jackson at this point last year, I remember tweeting about it. I remember talking about it on the show, being like, look, Daniel Jackson looks like he has taken some strides and then some and could be the number one receiver on this Gophers team. And he lived up to that and then some. He was an absolute baller for the Gophers last year, and it started all in game 1. It actually started far before that in fall camp and in that spring session, like I just mentioned. But Le'Meke Brockington is showing that similar type of growth that we saw from Daniel Jackson last spring. We're seeing that from Brockington in this spring, and that is what makes me really excited for what could be with this Gophers offense if they take the opportunities. So I think if you have Daniel Jackson still here ready to ball out and you're seeing this growth from Le'Meke Brockington, you have 2 wide receivers that could be difference-making players in the Big Ten. So overall, I am extremely excited for Brockington. I think he has made a case to really be the locked and loaded number 2 wide receiver on this team, hands down, and a future wide receiver 1 next year. And I think that he has made a case for more opportunities to be schemed into more targets for this season. So he's number 1 for me on this list. The number 2 is a player that had an opportunity to play a little bit last year, got thrown into the fire, but he has come with a vengeance. That's none other than Maverick Baranowski, the linebacker for the Gophers. Now, this man has been playing with a newfound sense of confidence, speed, instinct, and so much more. He's even been chirping on the field, and I love it. I am here for it. It reminds me of when Sori Marin and Nubin would fire this defense up in 2022. Maverick Baranowski is bringing that type of juice, that type of fire, that type of energy to this defense, and I love it. Him, Devin Eastern, they've been bringing this swagger and confidence about him, and I hope it carries over to the season. But if Maverick Baranowski is playing like he has been in the spring and continues to progress forward through the fall and into the season like this dude is going to be a special linebacker, a special player for the Gophers in this upcoming season. In blitz packages, in coverage, in tackling, he has come so far from his redshirt freshman being thrown into the fire because of a Lindenberg injury and maybe having to communicate the defense, but not being 100% ready to do so. Look, he looks ready and then some. And I think he can even show the versatility and play a will linebacker position on the field with Cody Lindenberg. And actually, I would love to see the Gophers start game one with both him and Cody on the field. I think he has earned a starting role. And you pair that with a defensive player who wants to, or a defensive coordinator, I should mean, who wants to play fast. He wants to play violent, and he wants to play just like difference-making, chaos-driving defense. I think that play style should truly fit Maverick Baranowski, and it's why he should be a starter and an impact player in this game, regardless of Devin Williams coming back from injury and being healthy, regardless of other linebackers in this room potentially showing well. I think Maverick Baranowski and Cody Lindenberg could be a dangerous duo in that linebacker core and really help get this Minnesota defense back into that top upper echelon of the Big Ten. So hopefully that's what we get to see this upcoming season. Now, number 3 for players who made a case for more opportunities, more reps, maybe even a starting opportunity is Phillip Daniels, right tackle right now for the Gophers. He also is the first lineman to come in 6 lineman packages that the Gophers have used from time to time, whether it be a Wildcat, whether it be when we sometimes would have like a Kramer or a Seth Green come in as the quarterback. Those type of packages, we've had the 6 offensive linemen. Phillip Daniels has worked his way into that slot, but he has also worked his way onto the field competing with Martez Lewis from time to time and getting some ones reps. Definitely liked it. You see the emotion and the fire he plays with. You see the tenacity. He's been coming along well. The coaches are really impressed with him. And he's definitely a name that you're going to want to know, because I think come fall camp, it's going to be a battle between him and Martez Lewis. Whoever can do it the most consistency at the highest level and bring the best is going to win that job. So that way Quinn Carroll can stay on the interior at right guard, where he is better suited to play as opposed to the tackle position. So I think Phillip Daniels is definitely a name who's played himself into opportunities. Now, moving into number 4 of our 5 on this list is Pierce Walsh, tight end. I've talked to you about this spring, and he has been one of my favorite guys to watch in the spring coming up. He has just a special knack around the ball, soft hands. He's come down with some great grabs, some special grabs. The timing he's worked on with both Max Brosmer and Drake Lindsey, he just seems to always be in the right place at the right time, and he makes the dependable grab, and that's what you want in a tight end. Now you're telling me he's a redshirt freshman. He looks far stronger than he did coming in his true freshman year. He looks like he's a better blocker. He has a better understanding, and he still has a ways to go when it comes to the blocking aspects, but he's showing that he can be a weapon on the field and he can be a difference maker on the field. And I think he'll get some opportunities this year. Now, Gears and Callerup were both injured throughout this spring, so we didn't get to see them on the field that much, but I think Pierce Walsh has made a case for himself to get into that conversation starting in the fall and maybe push Jamison Gears and possibly take some of those snaps with the ones, whether it be both of them in tandem or the winner takes all. But regardless, I've been impressed with Pierce Walsh, and I look forward to seeing what happens with him. And then number 5, who has made a case for some opportunities or at least a competition and battle in the fall, is Nuke Hayes, wide receiver for the Gophers, redshirt freshman. Now, heading into this spring, I feel like he was kind of below the starters on the depth chart, of course, with Daniel Jackson, Lemeki Brockington, Elijah Spencer, Caleb Lanier. I think he was working in a tier with Christian Hoskins, TJ McWilliams, and maybe he was even working behind those type of guys. But through this spring, it seems like he has passed a lot of those names, and he has had moments where he runs with the ones and he hasn't looked slow. He hasn't looked out of place. He's looked like he could really step in there and make some moments happen if given the opportunity. I would love to see him at least head into this fall with a chance to get some snaps on the actual season, because he looks like he can make a difference. And even though he isn't a baffling 6'4" receiver or anything of the sort, he seems to find separation. He seems to wiggle his way loose, and he seems like to always come down with the big catch. I remember the back end zone touchdown I saw Drake Lindsey throw his way. It was the only touchdown on the day in that second practice that we were available to see, but he looked nice. He looked special. He looked like he was making moments, and I love what I've been hearing from him, or from about him in this spring sessions. It sounds like he definitely earned his way into the opportunity to compete for some time this fall. Now, names that I have as honorable mentions: Kerry Brown, Zaquan Bryan, and Rylan Kelly. And then the running backs rooms, Marcus Major and C.A. Bangura, have definitely stepped up in ways that have made the team feel confident with this running backs room. So overall, I think there are good things happening with these Gophers, and I am excited. But those are my biggest winners of the spring session and who has made a case for extra snaps. Now, coming up next, we're going to talk about Darius Taylor, because I think he is ready to run the Big Ten. And I'm not just saying that because I cover the Gophers. I have some factuals to back this up. I think he could be a top 3 running back in the conference, but I think he could even make a case for number 1. And we're diving into why coming up next. First, let's talk about that app that you need to download yesterday if you haven't already, and that is none other than Monopoly Go. Because either as a player or a fan, you've always had those moments where you're looking at the scoreboard, it's not looking good, and you're feeling like, man, I cannot make this happen. I'm not going to be able to pull off the comeback. But you're like, you know what? We're not giving up. We're digging deep. We're going to lift our heads to the sky, and we're going to get back in the game. And you can do that by pulling off bank heists, taking as much of your friends' money as possible, and climbing your way up the leaderboard. So definitely download the Monopoly Go app. It is free, and it's Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime, with a ton of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your friends. And there's so much to do, including the leaderboards, including many dynamic Monopoly boards, and you can charge players rent on iconic properties like you are in the classics. But on top of that, you can make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put your game face on, and download the Monopoly Go app now for free on the App Store or Google Play today. And while we are at it, we definitely want to talk about the number one ticketing app in my heart, and it should be in yours as well, and that is none other than Gametime, because Gametime offers you the best last-minute deals when it comes to tickets. But they also have amazing features like the all-in pricing, where you can toggle this feature and all of a sudden you see what you pay up front. No surprises at the checkout. On top of that, one of the fees that people probably don't realize is there, but you should, and you should take advantage of it every single time, is the seat views, where you get a panoramic view from your seat before you buy the tickets, so you know what to expect before you head to the game. On top of that, like I said, Gametime will credit you with 110% of the difference if they aren't the lowest price out there, because they have a lowest price guaranteed. And if you don't meet it, then like I said, you get 110% of the difference credited to you. So definitely give it a try. Download the Gametime app, and while you're there, create an account and use promo code Locked On College. That's LOCKEDON College for $20 off your first purchase. So download the Gametime app. Terms and conditions apply. Use that promo code Locked On College for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Gophers fans, before we dive into why Darius Taylor is ready to be the best running back in the Big Ten, I just want to give a shout out to the free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming from ESPN and all of those other shows. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news on a 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube and free on the Amazon Fire TV channel apps. Just type in Locked On Locked On Sports today, or you can check out Locked On Sports Minnesota, where it's all of that, but strictly to the Minnesota side of things. Vikings, Wild, Gophers, Twins, T-Wolves, you name it, you've got it over at the Locked On Minnesota Sports. Definitely give those both a follow and check them out today. But let's dive in on Darius Taylor and why he is ready to run the Big Ten. He could be a top 3 back in the conference, hands down, but I think he can be the number 1 player. And this is a conference that has been known for its running and its success at the running back position. So could Darius Taylor, as a sophomore, take over and lead the conference in rush yards or touchdowns? I think so. Before people get up in arms and they're like, man, this dude is just a homer. He has no idea. He's just talking out his butt. No. Darius Taylor was leading the entire conference in rush yards through the Iowa week. I believe that was week 6. He was leading the entire conference by almost 100 yards, if I believe, or if I'm correct. It was really close to 100 yards if it wasn't over 100 yards. And this was as a true freshman who was still getting his feet wet, who was still sharing touches at times. That is why this isn't unrealistic at all. That is why this could possibly happen. Now, touchdowns might not be as likely because Minnesota has shown a tendency to throw a decent amount in the red zone, but also they struggled to punch them in last season. And then you look at some teams that just run the ball like crazy in the red zone. I look at Michigan last year. Blake Corum had 27 touchdowns. So I just don't know if we're going to get to that level. But when it comes to rushing yards, I think he can be the leader hands down, bar none. And I don't even think that's exaggeration. Now, you look at his stats from last year. He finished the year with 799 yards and 5 touchdowns in 6 games. And that is not a real look at the actual numbers because that's not taking into consideration the friendly reminder that one of those games was against Nebraska week 1, where he only got 1 carry for 3 yards. So essentially, he almost had 800 yards rushing in only 5 games on the season. Now, that in itself was good for 8th in the entire Big Ten. And all 7 players in front of him played a minimum of 10 games. So all of them saw at least 4 games higher than what Darius Taylor saw, but most of them ended up playing 12 games or more. Now, the running backs in front of him was Kyle Monagai from Rutgers, 1,262 yards, 8 touchdowns in 13 games. That's really good. It led the conference. He had a great year. Blake Corum was next up, 1,245 yards, 27 touchdowns in 15 games. Definitely played more games. They got to the championship. They won it all. But regardless, a pretty good season. Then you had Braylon Allen, 984 yards, 12 touchdowns in 11 games. Travion Henderson, 926 yards, 11 touchdowns in 10 games. Katron Allen had 902 yards, 6 touchdowns in 13 games. LaShawn Williams, 821 yards, 1 touchdown in 14 games. And Devin Mockabee, 811 yards, 6 touchdowns in 12 games. Those were the only running backs in the entire conference that finished ahead of Darius Taylor, who only played 6 games in the year. But regardless, now Monagai is back for Rutgers, and he will be a threat to have that running crown. But Corum and Allen are both off to the NFL. Katron Allen is splitting a ton of touches with Nick Singleton, so I think we saw close to what his ceiling can be when he is splitting that many carries. And then you can say the same about Travion Henderson this year when Quinshon Judkins, who is one of the best running backs in the country as well, will be splitting touches with him. So those two kind of offset. They can maybe get towards that lower end of 1,000 yards on the season, but I don't see them going into the 1,200, 1,500, 1,700 range, which might be needed to lead the Big Ten Conference this year. Now, LaShawn Williams is going to be splitting time or carries with a healthy Caleb Johnson this year. Caleb Johnson was dinged up all last year. And then Mockabee has to be sure not to fumble his opportunity away from even being the lead back, where he had 8 fumbles to only 6 touchdowns last year. So the floor is open, and PJ Fleck has already said he won't be afraid to ride the hot hand. And let me tell you, Darius Taylor is going to have the hot hand in most of these games. Now, he was averaging 133 yards per game in rushing last year, and that is even including that 1 carry 3-yard game that he had versus Nebraska. So technically, if you take that game out because he only had 1 carry and it wasn't a real game of sorts, I think he is averaging about 150 some yards per game. But let's run with 133 yards per game, including that small game. If you would have taken that average and added it to his total for the 7 missed games he had at his average, he would have had 1,730 rushing yards. Now, not only would that have been a school record for the Golden Gophers, but it would have led the entire Big Ten Conference by almost 500 yards. And that isn't out of the realm of possibilities for Darius Taylor in a healthy season. But even if you take his yards per game down by 33 yards per game, dropping it down, and that's a significant dropping of yards per game. Even if you take him at 100 yards per game in those final 7 games, he comes in at what? 700 plus 800, 1,500 rushing yards. And that is still almost 300 rushing yards above Monagai over at Rutgers. So I think the possibility is definitely there for Darius Taylor to be the number 1 rushing running back in the Big Ten Conference. And the possibility is real. And don't take for granted how special this young running back we have on this team is. Darius Taylor is the real deal. And this next season, and hopefully 2025, could be a very special run from a very special player. So definitely tap in, get excited for it, and hopefully we get to see him lead the entire conference in rushing. Now, the final thing I want to talk about on today's show is how exciting Drake Lindsey can be as a future quarterback for the Gophers. That's what we're diving into to wrap this one up today. First, we got to talk about our friends over at FanDuel, official sportsbook of Locked On. Now, it's time for the NBA playoffs, which is the best time for the NBA basketball. It's a different level of basketball when it comes to the playoffs. Same thing with hockey. You've got playoffs in both those sports, plus baseball in full swing, plus golf is just getting started here in this early spring. So you got lots of things to bet on when it comes to every game, every opportunity, and the best place to do that is FanDuel. Now, right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed, which is the best deal by far because it means you win no matter what. You can bet on everything from slap shots, home runs, slam dunks, winners, losers, streaks. You have who gets fired. It's all there on FanDuel. So definitely go over and check out an app that's simple, safe, and secure to use. And you'll get $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, as long as you make your bet. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook of Locked On. All right, Gophers fans, we are diving into how exciting Drake Lindsey can be as the future quarterback of this Golden Gophers team, because Drake Lindsey has been attached to Max Brosmer's hip pocket, ready to learn, ready to absorb everything in like a sponge, ready to take his game to the next level when it is his time to shine. And he is learning from a player who got second in the FCS Heisman, the Walter Payton Award, a guy who has done it at the highest level in the FCS play, and a guy who has a ton of experience, has broken down film, understands where to be on the field, understands where his guys need to break their routes, understands when and how to do different timings of routes, where the ball needs to be, the placement of it all. He understands it. And that's the best type of player for Drake Lindsey to learn from in his true freshman year. And it sounds like he has been grasping things very quickly. And on top of that, you've seen the moments in the spring, but you're talking about a player who, as a senior, helped lead his team to a 13-0 record and a state championship in which he was named the MVP. He threw for nearly 4,000 yards in his senior year with 3,941 yards while completing 69% of his passes. And on top of that, he tossed 54 touchdown passes against 3 interceptions, a touchdown to interception ratio of 18-1. Now, he had 6 games with at least 300 yards passing, and he had a season high of 535 yards passing in one single game. Now, he threw at least 2 touchdown passes in every single game of his senior season, with 6 games of 5 or more touchdowns, including 7 touchdowns against one school. Now, in his junior year, that was also impressive. 3,620 yards, 67% completion, 37 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. And you look at his entire prep career, all 4 years, you add them all together, he had 90 passing touchdowns to 7 interceptions. 90 to 7. That's baffling. That isn't easy to do no matter what type of high school you're playing at. That is impressive in its own right. And you're starting to see the flashes here in the spring. You're starting to see the touch, the lob passes, dropping a dime into a basket for Nuke Hayes, seeing Pierce Walsh come across the center and him hitting for him for a strike before two defenders come across. He is throwing with touch, anticipation, learning from his mistakes, tight window throws. And now, yes, there have been some balls batted down at the line. There have been some throws he'd maybe want back. There have been plays where he probably would have been sacked, but it is exciting to see the possibilities. And so Daniel House, one of my favorite Gophers media people to talk to, especially at these events, but we just chop it up all the time. He says his elite trait, Drake Lindsey's elite trait, is his anticipation. And you saw that full front on some of these spring practices. And that's impressive that a high schooler is able to throw with anticipation at this speed, at this level, this early as a true freshman in an early enrollee situation. Now, Drake told us here on the show, here at Locked On, if you haven't watched that show yet, you definitely should. He told us that he was aiming to make strides in his senior year by improving in his anticipatory throws and being able to throw with anticipation, throw things open, and get his timing down. Basically get the ball out of his hands, always on time, always ahead of time, and ready to deliver. And that was something he really stressed heading into his senior year. And it is showing even now at the D1 level in spring practices that he has that ability, and it is going to continue to carry over as the game slows down for him. So you take all that together, and then you look at what could be. It's exciting. It's very exciting. Even Coach Fleck said, I don't know if I've ever seen someone as young as Drake make as the strides that he's made as early as a true freshman in only 3 months. And he's learning from someone who's super smart and experienced in Max Brosmer, so it only can go up as the season goes on. And as the roster sits right now, I think he is the quarterback too. And if he gets maybe half of the season to really sit and learn and grow and whatnot, I wouldn't be afraid if something happened and he had to step in as the quarterback too. So it makes you comfortable. Now, we want Max Brosmer to play as QB1 and to be as successful as he was at New Hampshire, if not even more successful, and help lead this team through his leadership, through his experience, through his talent. I can't wait to see Max Brosmer play football for this Gophers team. But I love the potential building behind him and working with him in Drake Lindsey. So I think this Gophers quarterback room is starting to be in a good situation. Now, they still need probably one more scholarship quarterback working in this room just in case, but I am not as afraid if Drake Lindsey heads in as your QB2, even as a true freshman, as I maybe would have been before the spring, not knowing how he adjusts to the speed of the game. But everything seems to be coming along really quickly, which is promising for this Gophers team. Now, you add all of that together, and you remember that this is a kid from Arkansas who wanted to be here, and he tripled down on that. He didn't double down. He didn't just do it one time committing. He told people over and over, as his home state, Arkansas, wanted to get involved and get him to stay in the state. As other schools started to come, as his success grew, he was like, nah, I'm Minnesota's where I'm going to go. That's where I want to be. And that connection, who his grandfather, who had played for the Minnesota Vikings, his favorite team, Drake Lindsey's favorite team, the Minnesota Vikings, he's got those ties to his grandfather who played for the Vikings. So it is a storybook type of potential for Drake Lindsey and his time here with this program, and the building up to status that could be something legendary, something, a fairy tale for folks. If Drake Lindsey can come in here and absolutely ball out during his time and make a name for himself and have those ties to Minnesota with his grandfather and be the guy that stayed through it all, through the ups and downs, through the lack of recruiting that he absolutely should have had more of, I'm excited. This is building up, and I'm ready for everything to come together here for Drake Lindsey. That's going to do it for us on today's show. Now, like I said, tomorrow we are going to dive into some more football talk and so much more. So be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube so you don't miss any of that going forward. I will see you then. Row the boat, Scotty Mago Gophers, and don't forget to hit subscribe.